late time video recording again. Was a long day. But before I pass out to sleep, oh god, I am going to get today's video in. Fatigue be damned. And I'm just realizing how nice the vine looks on camera. It looks a bit more boring in real life, but the vine looks divine on camera. We've crossed the middle of the tonal spectrum of style genres. Casual is basically where it all balances. That was the last video. So now we're into the lighter tones. And as I already kind of remarked on in the main style video, the main video on styles and genres, on the lighter side, it's not really so much about distinctive genres as it is about the tools, about the ways that stories are told. That sounds like it's style, but it's not so much that everything is painted in a certain style. It is more that the story is told and individual events along the way are kind of setting the lighter tone. But the consistency with which certain lighter storytelling tools are used makes them almost seem as a genre. This is important because that means that whatever style you choose, it will not permeate everything. You can have a story be told in a very casual or even slightly dark tone, but lighter things will shine through. Lighter storytelling techniques will shine through, and they will very much define how the story is received. So the first of those tools, which I also remarked on earlier, is the whole Bathos thing. And I actually looked it up briefly since last. And where I found the description, it had a very satisfying, I would say, perhaps even a bit dramatic um, definition of Bathos, which was that it is when storytelling goes from being grand to being vulgar. So the idea is basically that you have something that might seem like a certain style, um, very epic, very grandiose, perhaps even dark, but the intensity of that style is just completely undermined by the way the tone just drops all of a sudden. Um, this could be the grand villain making a grand statement of, oh, I'm going to win and I'm going to destroy you. and then falling smack on his face off the stage and breaking his nose or something. And suddenly none of it seems as grandiose as it's supposed to be. Or it could be the example that I think I used before about how in Doctor Strange there is a very tense emotional moment um, with the main character, and that is undermined by his magical cape starting to snatch the single tear from his eye, and being kind of motherly and annoying the main character, turning emotional drama into, I guess, humor, you'd say, making light of a a heartfelt moment. And that is basically the core of Bathos. It takes the weight out of everything it touches. It makes light of things. It's constant quipping. It's constant jokes. It's the Marvel movie formula. It's setting up great things and then making fun of them within the story itself. And you could argue that it's just superficial, that it's just jokes, it's just words, it's just some smart mouth making a quick remark about their situation, and it doesn't really influence the outcome. Dangers are still dangers, and risks are still risks. Consequences are still consequences. But for Bathos to not become completely unbelievable, it has to be grounded in how the world works in the story. You will not have constantly quipping heroes if those heroes know that they could be sliced up and or tortured at any given moment. The consequences of this Bathos behavior, the consequences of making light of things, cannot be so horrible that making light of things becomes unreasonable. Which is why Bathos usually goes hand in hand with a couple of other things. One of those things is that anything meaningful is basically simple. Things are not simple. Things are not simple overall, but the important things are simple, and the complex things are approached humorously, usually with some variant of "Are you serious?" when someone looks at a insanely complicated thing. And no, it's not serious. It all looks complicated, but it is all really simple. You just need to know what to do. Um, it's the hero looking into an engine that needs to start and seeing all the insanely complicated pieces and parts of it, and going, "Are you serious?" To the technical genius trying to save the situation. And the technical genius says, "It's very easy. Just push the blue button," or something along those lines. things look hard, but they really aren't. The pathos of the situation is you look at a really, really complicated, daunting task, but then you figure out no, it's not. The situation is far more lighthearted than it initially appears to be. It's people getting slammed around, beaten to a pulp, but then getting up, giving some kind of gung ho remark or something, and then either continuing the fight as if not as if nothing happened, but as if things that happened were not even remotely as dramatic as they seemed, or just collapsing on the ground in somewhat comedic style. Is that all you got? And then slam, you're flat on the ground, and then waking up in a hospital bed. The consequences are not dark enough for quipping and humorous remarks to seem outlandish. Everything is taken lightheartedly, and the remarks, the grand to vulgar effect of making fun of big epic dramatic moments, they're just the symptoms of it. The reality of it is that good usually wins in the end, usually wins out. Things are not as bad as they look, things are not as complicated as they look. And it's just like casual style, it's more about the story than having to understand the world. If there is something that is really complex about the world that you need to understand in order to follow the story, someone will make it simple for you. Don't worry, just continue. Don't worry, just continue with the story. And creating a Bathos story isn't really a big challenge because it's not so much about the story itself. The story is a vehicle for making light of something that seems frightening. In many ways, Bathos is the anti horror because it constantly takes up a lot of topics, a lot of situations that would usually be very fitting in a horror story, or at least a an emotionally tense story. It may not be the horror of death and dismemberment, but it could be the horror of screwing up a major project, or the horror of alienating your loved ones or something. But it takes these very dramatic, very daunting things, and without making them seem completely ridiculous, it makes light of them. Things are not as bad as they look. Things are not as dangerous as they look. Things are not as complicated as they look. Take any adjective to describe a situation, uh, take any negative adjective, and simply flip it. This looks complicated. No, it's simple. This looks dangerous. No, it's fairly harmless. This looks like it'll take a lot of effort. No, you'll figure out some kind of way to cheat it. You experience the story of a Bathos story as first very very bad, then not so bad. It's it's the story equivalent of seeing a great big monster in the dark and then finally realizing that it's just a poodle standing up on a stack of boxes. And that is what most of the story, most of a Bathurst story, is going to be about. It's about setting up situations that seem great and big and daunting, and then making it clear that they are not this. Um, and that doesn't mean that everything is just a joke, but it will, the main characters will be more fit to handle things than it immediately seems. The big task that looks really hard to get ready for, the one that requires immense skills and immense resources, the main characters will be far more prepared for that than it would logically seem. They will go through training easier, they will get resources easier. It goes in this way, it's actually anti gritty. Um, Gritty stories are all about how things are really hard. This is about how things that look really hard aren't that hard at all, but you still need to do them. It will require something from you, it just will not require what you think it will. And for some, that kind of diffuses the tension and makes things less interesting. But for fans of the genre, for fans of the style, all of this diffusing tension is actually the point of it. The point is to tell a story that on the outside looks really big and complicated, but as you get into it, it's, I'm almost going to say friendly, but it's more lighthearted and easy is not the right word, but more lighthearted and surmountable than it appears. Bathos as a style is figuring out that things are not as bad as they seem, but that requires first making it seem as if they are bad. And when these stories go on for a long time, either long stories or multiple stories in the same universe or whatever compares to that, having it not become too cliche or too predictable is very important, because it's very easy for it to become predictable that okay, they're going to face off against a big enemy. No, that enemy is not that big, it's not that dangerous. And that is most easily done by maintaining the fact that things are not as bad as they seem, but they may be different from what they seem as well. The enemy might not be as big and bad as you thought, but they did something clever, and now you have to solve another problem. The situation that your main characters are in may not be as dangerous as it at first seemed, but it's going to be it is instead going to be very troublesome and annoying and perhaps humiliating and causing some other problems. Maybe they won't die, but instead they'll be humiliated and they will have to struggle through problems that they wouldn't usually expect to have to struggle with. It's small twists like these that create a lot of the more interesting storytelling in this style. A very well told Bathos story will take really big problems, really daunting challenges, and instead of going all out about how the characters have to suffer through it, or just making fun of it and going, haha, no, 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 no problem at all, it will use these situations to point out something interesting about the problem and have the main characters realize, perhaps at the last moment, that they can handle this if they just think about it in a certain way. So it should be obvious that even though Bathos is perhaps best portrayed as um, taking something um, scary or overly dramatic and making fun of it, what Bathos really is making things look not as bad as they appear, or making things not be as bad as they look. It's probably a better way to phrase it, while still making them interesting, perhaps by making them different from what they look. So it's lighthearted, but it's not a walk in the park. And I wish I could explain it clearer than this, but I hope that I conveyed the basic essence of it, because if it's done well, this is a very popular style and genre.